Hey guys, let's talk creature baits. All right, first thing we're going to get down to is what is my definition of a creature bait. Not everything that comes in packages like this are a creature bait. At least they aren't to me anyway. First off, I have what I call the bugs. Now bug can be, you can split that, and I don't know, some people probably call it a craw, leave it together, it's a beaver tail. But to me it's about a 3 or 3.5 inch and it's flat. Doesn't matter which side, it's the same either way. Those are what I call bugs. That is what I'll use on a jig, or I might use that on the chatterbait. I can use it by itself, but usually when it's that small, it's a trailer for something else. So to me, that's a bug. Then we have crawdads. To me, that's a crawdad. That's definitely a crawdad. And though this one's got a little bit of a flatter body like the other, it's got the side legs, the antennas, to me, I'll still call that a crawdad. So those, for me, are crawdads. Then we get into what I call creature baits. Here's one by Lunker City. It's got all kinds of doodads. If you'll notice, most of these are going to be kind of the same. They're going to have this on the side, the longer tails in the arms. You got that one from Lunker City. Let's see, what do we got here? Here's a Jean LaRue. That's a smaller one. But I got a bigger one here too. Excuse me, that was not a Jean LaRue. That's probably a Yum. Here's a Yum. Again, this one's got your rounded body, but it's got the long tail. The biggest thing about a creature bait for me is, here's a brush hog by Zoom. The biggest thing for me is a creature bait is usually 4, 4.5, 5, maybe even 5.5 inches long. The creature bait is long. A lot of times for me, the crawdads aren't as long. And then when I'm getting in to what I call the bugs, they're rather short. So that's the way I just separate all my soft plastics into 3 categories. We're just going to talk about the creature bait. So how am I going to fish a creature bait? In my case, I fish them a lot like a plastic worm, as far as the tackle that I'm using and the hooks. Such as, let's say no weight. I'm using maybe a 3/0, 4/0 wide gap hook. It's got a keeper on it. I can run my creature bait here, Texas style, so it's weedless, no weight. Here's a 4/0 wide gap hook. It's got the weight built into the front. Now it's a 1/4 ounce weight on this one, so you can run it that way. You can even take a shaky head. Take a shaky head, put a creature bait on the shaky head, work with that, work along the bottom. Now my favorite way to work a creature bait is actually on a swim bait hook. All right, so in this case right here, this is a 3/0 swim bait hook with an 1/8 ounce weight. It's got a keeper on the front to attach my creature bait. Basically, I'm just gonna bring him up, stick him in the middle, skim the point so it's buried down in, and I'll run him Texas style. That's probably my favorite way to run a creature bait. Just a little bit of weight, help get it out there, get it a little bit down in the water. Now I have another way that has been a pretty effective way to catch some fish. This is a little system I've come up with. First off, let me kind of pull it apart so we can kind of see it. Now what we have is, we're starting out with a bobber stop. And a lot of times you'll have a bullet weight. So you can peg that, do it Texas style. Only in this case, my bullet weight has a collar on it. And the collar will hold a skirt. Now, I know there's these that are called punching jigs. And basically they're 3/4 ounce or an ounce, and you punch down through the real heavy mats in the cover. That's not what this is. This is just a bullet weight with a collar. It comes in 1/4 ounce, 3/8 or ½ ounce. I get them from Barlow's Tackle online. It's the only place I've seen them so far. Now in my case here, I'm using the 3/8 ounce because that's the same as I use on a jig. Now beyond that, what have I got? Basically in this situation, I've got a 4/0 worm hook, and I've taken my creature bait and I'm just put him on here, Texas style. Got him rigged weedless. So I've got my 4/0 hook with that. I just bring down my deal, slide down my bobber stop, and technically what I almost have is a weedless jig. It's 3/8 ounce, the same as my jig. It's got a skirt the same as my jig, but because it's got the long body, this 5-inch, 5.5-inch body, I can put it on a 4/0 worm hook instead of trying to put this on a jig where so much of it's going to be hanging out the back of the hook. I really like this. This has caught some nice fish, and mainly because I like the jig fish, so this is a lot like the jig fishing. So now, where are we going to fish these, or how are we going to fish these? Well, let's take the case. Here's the weighted hook, the 1/8 ounce weighted hook, or we could take the regular 4/0 hook with the keeper, or we could even go with this 1/4 ounce. All this is pretty lightweight. Here, I'm going for shallower water. I'm going where I don't think the fish are going to be quite as deep. In my case, in this lake right here with lily pads, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take something like this. I'm going to cast it up on top of the lily pads, drag it across the top. I might try to hop this around a little pad to pad, make some commotion up there. You'll be surprised the number of times a fish will follow you just under the pads. They may come up, probably going to have a hard time getting them through the pad, but bring it right to the edge, and when I hit that last pad and I let it drop, keep an eye, because a lot of times that's when they're going to hit it. I'll let it sink a little bit. They're going to hit it when it's going down. This is where I like the weighted hook, because 9 times out of 10, when this one starts down, it doesn't take a nosedive. It floats down fairly level, maybe a little bit of a down angle, but that slows it down. I don't want it to go down real fast. I'm thinking the fish are shallower. Now, let's say I'm taking this and I've got a real grassy mat along the edge. A grassy mat's going to be a little bit different. We're not going to try to probably put this down inside that mat, because we're going to get it down in there. Weedless or not, we're going to hang up and be pulling grass out with us every time. So a lot of times what I'm trying to do here is put it right on the edge of that grassy mat and then just let it go down. Hopefully you get, if they're right in under that mat, that's where you get it. As you start to come out and come down a little bit, sometimes that's where you're going to get your hits. But in the case of the vegetation and the grassy mats, I'm not going to try to put this up on top the same way I would if I was fishing lily pads. How about deeper water? Right back here behind me, those rocky banks back there, in our case broken up concrete. That's pretty deep water. I get right off those rocks right in there, and it's going down real fast. That's where I like to fish a jig, but that's where I also like to fish this. The one here I've got rigged up with the bullet weight with the collar on it. With the 3/8 ounce, this gets me down fast in deeper water, just as it would if I was fishing a jig. But again, I'm fishing it weedless. I don't get hung on the rocks as bad as I would with a hook, or especially if I'm around brush. Even in those lily pads, sometimes your hook on a jig is hooking up in there. This gives you a shot to get in a little bit thicker cover and not get hooked up as often as you would if you were fishing a jig, but yet basically you're still fishing sort of like you're fishing a jig. And that's the way I fish all of these, whether I'm dealing with the lightweight hooks on here, or the shallow or the deep, or whichever one I'm working with. I like to fish them like a jig. Bring them down, I bring my rod tip up and down a little bit differently. So I may be rigged up just like I am with a worm, but I'm going to fish it more like a jig than I am like a worm. Now, shaky head, this one usually comes a little bit different in some respects. This one, you can take her down to the bottom, and that way from there you can either jig it up and down like the jig, or sometimes here you can just slowly drag this across the bottom and slow drag it back to you. Sometimes that can be effective too. So that's how I do it, guys. Go out, give it a shot yourself. Thanks for sticking with me. Subscribe to our channel if you would. Hope to see you again real soon.